We'd like to move on and spend the rest of the time for the discussion. This morning, the overview of the draft was explained, and the experience of Chernobyl was discussed, and also dialogue was introduced. So, including comments, we would like to have a further discussion. So, anyone who would like to ask a question or make a comment, raise your hand. So, please give us your name and affiliation. My name is Shinpei Kanno. In 2011 or I started doing the research of specimens since 2011. Not immediately after the accident. What do you mean by specimen? Sampling research, mainly in hotspots. Just the other day, in 2019, we got specimens, samples, with the permission from Tokyo government. We did soil sampling, and the highest one was per kilogram, 1,950 becquerel. And we actually did a measurement in terms of a square meter, 77,000 becquerel. But the 1 millimeter per year, that's below that, 0.1 millimeter, or it doesn't matter whether the height. We did also the overall screening. It took 120 hours. In non-hot spec, we did a measurement and sample. And at 5 centimeters, we did a sample. So we saw this value. So it's less than 1 millimeter per year. So it's a controlled area. So what I'm going to do, that is one question. And in the same area, the remaining soil, a lot of it's not environmental concentration, but a lot of soil mud that out, and there are some areas where it was over 0.23. The highest place, Mizumoto Park, there's a Kawasemi no Sato in Katsushika Ward in Tokyo, 5 centimeters. Katsushika, I did a measurement, 5 meters, 1 centimeter. There was 2.9 microsievert at the height of 1 centimeter or 5 centimeters. And for your information, the sample showed 35 million. Even in an area where it's less than 1 millimeter per year. So there's no discussion about these numbers. I don't think it is correct for you to not mention this. The specified waste, the workers, they have to wear masks and protective measures. We have this kind of high dose in our living space here in Tokyo. So what do you make of it? I have another question. Sorry, I've been rather lengthy, but I have another question. In Namie town, the area contamination has been over, and I did a sampling per kilogram, 300,000 becquerel, nearly 300,000 becquerel. And the location is not Itate, but Namie, Karimo. There's a region called Karimo in Namie, and the sampling was about 300,000 becquerel after decontamination. And allowing people to return there, decided by the central government. What do you make of this publication? So I think you have to discuss this becquerel-related question. Including Tokyo, in many points, there are areas where the level is high in soils, and I think that's your point. And so how should we face it? So in the ICRP draft, we only talk about the effective dose rate, and so although it doesn't reach that, what should we do it? I think that's your point. That is true, but also if it's beyond 1 millimeter, higher numbers are observed from the soil. So you have to discuss becquerel. At least 1 millimeter becquerel, well, 185,000, well, minimum, I think, ALARA. In terms of ALARA, it's a minimum. So you have to think about it. Thank you. So at any rate, what do we make it to protect the environment and people? So a high level of contamination. How should we respond to that? So then, how should we deal with the hot spots legally? It's not, well, maybe I think your question is how that can be reflected on the ICRP standard. Of course, we don't describe that in detail, but the concept is if that affects people or environment, that has to be processed appropriately, so there has to be a system. Well, that is true, but you have to discuss becquerel. Well, let me say this once again. Even if it's less than 1 millimeter per year, there is a contamination like a controlled area. That's true. If you deny it, I'm not denying it. I'm not denying it, but I can take you there anytime. So how should we face it? That's your question. Well, decontamination should be done at least, and so how should we face the contamination based on ALARA principles? Well, the 1 millimeter per year, well, you have to do it minimally this area. So any other comments who are working on the same issue? Anyone? Well, yes, please. I'm a decontamination advisor in Fujita in Fukushima. Well, I think you should talk to the Environment Ministry. So there should be additional decontamination. Environment Ministry are doing this very carefully. They are doing a follow-up decontamination. So through municipalities, say in the case of Namie, you should contact the Manie Town Hall. And so if it's a 1 or millimeters, well, the level should be reduced. So the Environment Ministry does a good job in 3.8 microsievert in a location. Well, so the municipalities should contact the municipalities. Then one example is Tomioka. They do a very good job. They do it very carefully. So, well, there are such examples, and so if you contact them, it's not that they are not going to do anything. So I think that's my suggestion. Thank you. The becquerel discussion. Using a becquerel criteria, and in this publication, well, example is about the restriction of food intake. Well, I think that's one example mentioned in the publication. But TG93 report draft, the basis is the reference level in dose level would be used for optimization. The concept is described in the publication draft. And so when it comes to specific measures, individual actions, as we look at the reference level for this or that, the criteria, it can be radiation concentration in soil, and actions should be considered, including waste, including decontamination, that can be done. From the perspective of ICRP, where for specific actions, certain numbers should be considered and recommended well. We are not focusing on recommending such numbers. That's our basic stance. Please understand it that way.
Yes. Do you have a question?
No question, some comment.
Your relative answer?
If you speak about soil, if you speak about contamination of soil, about becquerels or kilobecquerels, it's much important to know the vast transfer factor or transfer parameter from soil to grasses, or to rice, for example. And if you speak for ambient doses, or take serum, for example, that's why we don't mention about becquerels or kilobecquerels. But you can have some correlation between contamination of the soil becquerel and ambient doses. It depends from situation, what do you want to create some models to prediction of behavior or prediction of dose situation, that's why. The choice is yours, depends on situation. If you, let's scale the contamination, you mentioned much more about the first about becquerels or kilobecquerels. Waste, about if you speak about waste, about becquerels or kilobecquerels. For example, in my country, 10 kilobecquerels per kilogram is the waste. Okay, thank you.
ありがとうございました。それでは次のご質問どうぞ。今、前。すみません、先ほど話しました井上ですけど、2つあるんですけども、1つは、まず簡単な方からいきますけれども、最後の講演にありましたように、IAEA そうですけど、ICRP も多分そうだと思うんですけど、ステークホルダーということは大好きな、大好きということはおかしいんですけれども、私は非常に大事ですけども、よく使うんですけども、やはりステークホルダーにもですね、先ほどのコメントにあったように、非常に重要なですね、直接関係しているステークホルダーと、極端な場合は第三者的なステークホルダーもあるわけですよね。ちょっと僕 IA の会議を行ったことあるんですけれども、すみません、ちょっとお待ちください。This question about the stakeholder.
Can you hear this? Can you hear this? Yes? Sorry. すみません。
じゃあ簡単に言いますけれども、ステークホルダーという言葉をよく IAEA の会議も ICRP も使うようですけれども、ステークホルダーというのは非常に使いやすい。
Is it easy at the terminology that you favor?
いいですか。いわゆるですね、ステークホルダーにも、いわゆる直接関係しているステークホルダーと、
They have directly related stakeholders and third-party like stakeholders you
だから
have.
少しですね、
So,
これは私 IA の会議に行ったんですけれども、
I
その
participated
ステークホルダーの言葉の使い方、またその時に対象としているステークホルダーはどういうものかと
who
いう
are the
ものをですね、
target
ある程度
stakeholders?
アイデンティファイした方が
You have to
いいと思います。
identify
これは私の
what
コメン
do
ト
you
です。
mean by stakeholders. That's my comment. Did you get it?
まずステークホルダーというのは別のですね。
For the environment. Welcome.
Yeah, I agree with you that stakeholder is a difficult term. it's so general, so generic. But we understand that different people have a different stake in the problem. People living in the contaminated affected territories face one kind of problem. In fact, they face 100 kinds of problems because there are so many different issues and so many different people. Government people are also stakeholders, but of a very different kind. International organizations are stakeholders, again, of a very different kind. Nonetheless, when we're forced to write a document about fairly general principles, we have to use terms like stakeholders. But I hope that when we talk about specific kinds of people facing specific concerns or problems, that we're a little more specific. We talk in our document, for instance, about responders. This is one kind of stakeholder who has a specific role. Sometimes we talk about residents. This is another kind of stakeholder. So please, if you find some places in our documents or when we speak on occasions when we're being too general, let us know, and we'll try and be more specific, because we have to understand that really every person is affected in a different way, has a different role to play, and it's sometimes not so useful just to say generally stakeholder. So I agree with you. We'll do our best to
Yeah, this is possible. I call it.
Thank you.
Question is, as Professor Kai mentioned at the very beginning, that he mentioned 10 millisieverts. And for this, there were a lot of discussions about 10 millisieverts number. But what sort of discussions were carried out, and what sort of raison d'etre do you have for setting 10 millisieverts? Because I know I attended the IA meeting, and I have seen the revised draft of when an accident happens. And at that time, there was a target. This sort of intermediate target should be established, was also mentioned in that. But basically, you have to really be able to show the logic for choosing the number 10 millisieverts. Another issue is that this sort of numerical numbers, or 100 is it, but for example, if it's 20 or 10 in this case, if you show these numbers or values, the people, residents, would just be really at a loss, because I know that in a number of cities in Fukushima, that because the residents say we have to go, everything has to be below 1 millisieverts for us to return. And you will lose actually trust by the residents if you just show numbers of such that. And if you're going to really designate specific numbers, you must have the logic for presenting these different numbers. Thank you very much for your question. I think you know that ICRP, we have 3 numbers, 1, 20, and 100. And this is a range that the ICRP has set. And this is also a reference level as well. And based upon that, taking that into consideration, for example, for radon and other existing exposure come into play. And how do we actually really take in all those things? And when you look at that, there are different situations, and the goal is all different but with different situations. And if it's radon, to get down to 1 millisievert is very, very difficult. In Japan, it's lower. But for example, if there were no accident, if there was a normal situation, and when that accident happened, then we will have to take it back to the original position as far as possible. And the logic, the reason for setting up these numbers is really to show justification. And for people who have been actually affected by the accident, then why 10? That is because when there's an accident, we estimate a high value. And then, if we set a low target or target value at the very beginning, people will know where to go to. And so it must be a step by step. So, and we would like to actually see how we can reduce the exposure to a certain group of people. And then once we achieve that, then set another. Why 10 is another question. For 10, there's no specific reason for that. It's just a process. And therefore, we received also many comments about that. Yes, and we will continue to actually discuss about how to actually set these numbers. Or for lower part, what was 110, we showed actually a range and the VS468, how do you set the priority for communication, I think is also very important. And we discussed that amongst ourselves. And at that time, we talked about those as well. And there was no reaction to that. And when you show, for example, number 10, you have to really definitely set a priority or whatever. You must actually show the reason for that. And you have to really write down the reasons for actually setting a specific number. Otherwise, the residents will be at a loss. They won't know what it's all about. And they, for their decision making, whether to return or not to return, also is very much jeopardized by the numbers that are just walking around without any reason.
Allow me, Aoki of Fukushima City. This relates to what is mentioned now. I understand that 10 post-accident additional exposure, 100 millisievert. So not to achieve the 100 millisievert likewise early on. 10 is the reference point that we should point it out. So this is a consideration behind. Is it right or not? And this time, draft report. The intention of this draft report from 1 to 20 with the existing exposure level from 1 to 10 to put 10 as a reference level. So if you could stay at 20 level early on, it should be under 10 or beyond 10. No, so you have to set it such a way so that it doesn't go beyond 10. So the radiological protection is to be done in a more conservative way. This is a message I have taken. As you said, the discussion, maybe is it something that you like to get relaxed? So you try to make it conservative. Is that a message? Is that right that I'm understanding? Is this your message? As much as you could, I'd like to have your answer. Conservative. You stay in the safer side. That is what is meant. Chris-san.
So the 10. We introduced the idea of 10 in the drafting process to try and be more clear about the lower part of the 1 to 20 millisieverts per year band. Obviously, we're not more clear because there are so many questions about the 10. We've heard these comments, and it's not an attempt to be more conservative. We meant to change nothing in principle, just to be more clear, but we failed, clearly. So, the drafting group, the task group, is now working very hard to find a better way to be more clear about what we mean. Because keep in mind that these numbers of 1, 20, 100, we're not recommending that a government use one of them. We're recommending general bands. So we ask governments to pick something in a band of 1 to 20 or 20 to 100. Because governments need flexibility to make decisions based on what the situation is in reality when an accident happens. So all these numbers are a general indication of a range that a government might pick their own specific criteria within. So it's meant to be very general guidance. We should focus less on the specific exact numbers and on the more general principle behind the guidance, and we will do something better with the 10 question. Please give us some time to figure out the best way to do this. Thank you.
So for 10, is that all right? My name is Ogino. Somebody from the floor actually asked about that diagram of, I think, Dr. Kai. And that is an estimated dose was the question. But the diagram is that after we took measures, it is the really residual dose. And in the planning level, whenever the residual dose goes upon the reference level, then we will have to take measures. And this has not changed even today. But however, in emergency case, of course, the gap is very big, and therefore, at times the exposure might go over the reference level. And that diagram shows that, and that we will actually take the protective action as a priority when that goes over the reference level. The understanding of that diagram seems to be very, very difficult. And that is why we were more on the safe side, on the conservative side. I think we have to make it clear. Yes, I agree with you. And of course, when the reference level is compared to the real lows, in the 3 steps that were shown on the slide, as Ogino-san said right now, Mr. Ogino said, when it is an under countermeasure situation, we will have taken a certain countermeasure, and the result is shown. There is a resulting dose, and there is a reference level. And even if it goes over that, if there are people with higher than that, we will put priority on that and to lower that. And also, we will then take the next step. We will have a next step to actually lower, take it lower. But I think what was just mentioned, of course, you can use it as an estimate, yes, as one way, and we can actually compare we can also compare the option as well. But as a diagram, I think the residual dose, both of them. But if there has been no countermeasures taken, then it will be the estimated dose in the start with. But I think it is very, very difficult to understand that diagram because it is very technical. Listening to that, I think it will be very difficult for the general public. So I would like to explain what I think. And Mr. Ogino said, I think, it also is under misunderstanding because there are 3. And it actually, the dose goes higher to optimization. That means the residual dose is the start of the next step. And therefore, if after countermeasures are taken, if there is still a residual dose, then it will be the start of the next step. In other words, it will be the estimated dose. And therefore, when you talk, it's the same, the residual or estimated dose are both the same thing. It is different in the way you look at it. Otherwise, general public cannot understand that. I think that would be easier to understand. I think that would be, my overview would be easier for general public to understand. Thank you very much for your input.
Trustee of
まあ、今い
Fukushima,
ろいろ意見出たんですけど、
there are various opinions raised.
個人の価値観、
Personal values, values of
それぞ
individuals,
れ違うんです
it
よね。
differs.
子供、それか
Child,
ら年寄り、年配者。
elder people.
当然その70代までなれば、
Because when you get to 70s or
早く帰り
80s,
たいという人もい
you
ま
want
す。
to call back home.
だけど子供のうちは、やっ
But when you're
ぱり
tired,
被爆させたくないというお
you
母さんたち
don't,
が
the
います
mothers want the children to
これによって数値に1とか
get exposed to the radiations. With the number 1 and 2, you demarcate
分断が起き
the
るんです
number so that there is the disintegration. In Fukushima, we are seeing this disintegration because of different values.
私はもっと高くてもいいよ。
It's okay, I take a higher number. And some people say, no, I don't take higher value. So there is a block or segregation.
私は ICRP
So
の
this is ICRP.
この否定するものが悪だと
So
私は
that this,
思います。
this is no good for ICRP definition. So that what is to be done,
その機関の避難の権利、
the right of evacuation
各個人個人に与えればいいんですよ。
should be given to each
例えば
individual.
1から
Like from
20 の
1 to
間は避難の権利を与えます
you are given the right to evacuate. You can go home, you can get evacuation.
人それぞれに
From person to person, you should be giving this right so that everything can be solved.
だけど今規制庁の方
But
が
now,
いらっしゃる
yes,
の
we
で
have a regulatory
それを準
authority
リシーブと機
so
関
that
と
we set it at 20 millisibelt. You go back home, but some people don't want to go back. In Namimachi, how many people are they returning home? 1,000 or so
今
people returning
避
home.
難者4万人という
We
の
have 40,000 evacuees. That's fake.
避難者の
The
定員が
number,
全く出たらめ
there is the number about evacuees wrong. More than 40,000
だけどどんどん
evacuees.
避難者
But now
帰ってきたよ
evacuees wanted to go home, return back home, and Japanese government are utilizing this in their own favored way, in a wicked way.
今回の ICRP
So
の
the
新しい勧告
ICRP
には
new
避難の権利
recommendation
を
that you should
選択できるようにしてください
identify, so you should identify the right for people to choose the right of evacuation. So that will be the panacea.
金はかかるかもし
But
れ
it
ない
might cost money on the
だ
side
け
of
ど
the
これだけ
government.
の事故を起こす
But we have done this much of a heavy accident, severe, serious accident. You are obliged to this. About what you say with the regulatory authority. You should give the right to the people to return home with this right of evacuation should be given to the people. The right of evacuation is difficult to understand. The people who want to return home, but some people don't want to come back home. So you demarcate between the two. That's the cause of a confusion. So you have to fairly solve this. So you can continue. You'll be given the right to continue to live. Then you continue to be evacuated, or you have to secure their rights of livelihood, life. So 20 the regions which are evacuated, of course, they are given the instruction to evacuate. If this is so the people are stopped from coming home, even the value comes down to 20. So that's why they are in the middle of the confusion. So it's not a matter of ICRP, but this is a very important point. So in your own experience, Jack-san, comment.
To be frank, I didn't follow clearly the discussion because this is so loud that we can't hear it's unbelievable. So it's difficult for us to listen.
AOA Japan Fukakusai is my name. Public comment that we have given, so I hope you read it. Earlier, in a previous comment, I don't know whether this relates to the prefecture people, but the optimization and the justification, optimization, justification, these words were used in frequent ways. And amongst the speakers, the economic constraint and social impact were discussed. Various factors are there, you said. Optimization or justification for everyone, it doesn't carry the same meaning from people to people. So of course, such social aspect and economic impact and so forth, in consideration of these factors are important in determining the post-accident policy. I'm confused between the justification and optimization, but the quantitative judgment should be made possible, maybe, by these words. And there are various values, and there are various lives. There are various things they want to protect. So in actuality, with the Fukushima accident, we knew that Japanese government, the social, economic impact by the evacuation has been considered significantly, so they try to minimize the evacuation order, and they are urging the people to return back home. So there are various factors you have to consider. It's taken for granted, but the people's safety and the radiological protection should be considered. So this is something to emphasize, to protect the people, to secure the evacuation. This is something to be emphasized. This is my opinion in addition to what's been expressed so far. Our attention. Radiation. It's not, the radiation is not everything. Of course, we have to be centering on the radiation. Under this condition, what we are emphasizing is that many people, stakeholders, are to be involved to come up and find a solution. It's a very general basics. But individually, these issues have to be discussed and identify and determine which way we should go for. This is something I can only answer. So such a thing should be included as a message. Any comment you would emphasize to my
So on justification, optimization, they're fairly technical terms and sometimes can be complex, but at their heart, justification just means make sure you do more good than harm, and optimization just means do your best. So generally that's what they mean. In essence, they're not much more complex than that. In terms of what's most important in the report, we were just discussing this yesterday, in fact, within the group. And probably these technical terms of justification and optimization are not the most important things. It's what you mentioned already. It's protecting people after an accident and protecting the environment after an accident. These are the key messages in the report. And then there's many, many pages of how one might do that. We're going to try and emphasize that even more, I think, as we further develop the publication based on your comments. So thank you very much for that. Sometimes as technical experts, we get caught up in our own technical system, but we have to remember what the whole point is. And the whole point of this publication is to help protecting people and protecting the environment in the event of an accident.
I have to repeat that in my own words, sorry.
それを高い人を早く優先的にお話を聞いてると
そういうやり方もあるだろうと思うんですけれども、そのグラフの中に
I think in the graph,
その自動のその制御費
the dose
トータルで考えると低いかもしれない。
might be low in total, but there are people who are really locked up in that graph because they're low in dose, and they are actually grouped as people with low dose. They might also reduce the dose, but there are also people that are receiving a higher dose and continue to receive that higher dose. So when you see that graph, and that there are people who are really related to different numbers, and if they want to, I think it is also a wonderful selection to try to live and go back and live in the best way possible. But in the recommendation, there is nothing that is written about those people. And of course, it's written how the people should go back and live in their own hometowns. But the TG does not explain what to do with people who are actually receiving higher dose. Oh, of course, it might not be within the jurisdiction by CRP. But people, what do you do with people who are actually meeting with higher dose? And unless you actually pay attention to those people, you cannot really say it's a real good recommendation for actually recommending people's future lives.
May I ask a question?
For example, my country, we will speak about accumulation dose, for example, higher or low doses. But we have created database, especially for all population, which was under radiation. And to check, every year we check the health of these people. Examination of the blood, hormone, and continue to check the health of these people. That's why, not for your recommendation, for the government, to have special program to support medical, not investigation, but to check the health of the people. If some people have diseases necessary to help in such a way, how to remove the diseases. You understand me? My question is, if you speak about doses, low or higher doses, but what do you mean low or higher doses? For example, for me as professional, 100 doses is okay for me, or 20 doses per year. But one more, for all people which was on international territory must be included in database and for check of their health. And it will depend which decision we will shall take. For example, if people will be destroyed, it necessary to help or surgical intervention of the other. And one more about, for example, we speak about doses. 1, 5 millisievert, 10 millisievert, it doesn't matter. Much more important for people which come back to this territory, infrastructure and economical development of this territory is much important. And I believe we shall speak not about doses, because for government it's easy. Oh, 10 millisievert is okay, you forget about you. That's why it's necessary all-time conversation with not only with people, but with local authority and government. If we can find the agreement, people come back on the territory, and the territory will be developed. Thank you.
It's important for us to help them understand in education, but it's difficult issue that you have identified. They are trapped, you said. In a time scale, it is written. So the priority is higher. We reduce the level with the higher exposure by referring to the reference level. We understand the scheme, but for each individual, time-wise, change occurs. So that on the whole, the dosage, how to take the dose, of course, it is not clearly defined in the document. So there are various measures, countermeasures, and the total dose distribution of individuals. In this case, what happens? This information is void, is not available. I don't think we can describe this in these details, but thinking of the concept of optimization, reference level is used. So what kind of approach do you take? We have with the existing exposure level, in order to explain the existing exposure level that is used. We have to rethink this, and we have to be more creative. We cannot give you the answer on the spot now, but this is a concept that we have in mind.
Just briefly, dose is important, and that's why we recommend that those with higher doses should know about it and try and take some actions to reduce if they wish, within reason. But I hope you catch that in the draft that we emphasize many times quality of life, or at least living conditions, because this is at least as important as dose. At some point, you see these graphs, and at some point you see most doses are very low, most are below reference level, but a few are still above. This is where people's choice has to come into play. Maybe I like to eat a lot of mushrooms from the forest, and that means I'm a little bit above the reference level, but I like the mushrooms, so I have to choose. But I know, I understand my choice. Or maybe once I understand this, I eat less mushrooms from the forest, my dose decreases. So it's always a balance between managing the dose, which is important, but it's not everything, and managing quality of life and giving people some relative freedom to make some choices. This is critical, I think. If the doses are very, very high, in the hundreds of millisieverts, that's another question. But when you're in the few millisievert range, and most people are below the reference levels, individual choice is very important. And some knowledge and some understanding of how to manage your life is crucial so you can make wise choices.
On this issue about people with higher doses, the experience has demonstrated that this is where the co-expertise process is really useful. Because people who have these higher doses, they are living in a community. They are neighbors, they are relatives. And if the co-expertise process is always a process with a community or a group of people, and if you participate to this co-expertise process, this is the way where you will understand why you have higher doses, where it comes from. It's because higher doses in a community means particular behavior. It means some people who, because of their work, have to stay longer outside than the average, or some people who don't know about the quality of the food products and they eat contaminated products. So the question is not to say higher doses, what to do. The problem is to understand why higher doses. And this is the role of the co-expertise process, is to help people to understand where, when, and how they receive their dose, and as soon. And this is done collectively by comparing with the neighbor. And this is where it is possible for individuals to come to this situation that was just described by Chris, where people have to make their choice. We know people I don't give names, but we know people in some communities that on purpose they like bamboo shoots, for example, at the season of the bamboo shoots, and they know now how to manage the fact that they would like to continue to eat bamboo shoots at the season. But they do it knowing exactly knowing what will be the impact for them, but they make the choice. They say, okay, I will have a slightly higher dose than the average, but I don't sacrifice the fact that in spring I like the bamboo shoots. You know, this is this balance between dose and quality of life, design, well-being. Alone, you cannot find the reason why you receive the dose. I mean, you need to embark yourself with people helping you to do measurements, to explore the reasons why you have high doses. And as soon as someone has the keys to understand why he has higher doses, he is changing his behavior automatically. I could tell you tens and tens of individual stories of people who were ignorant about the situation, who had high doses. And then, of course, the problem is some people have high doses. It is known by the authorities because they enter into some statistics, but nothing is said. Because if an authority says, oh, you have high doses, you should be careful. But what does it mean for someone if they don't know how to manage their dose? So this is why the co-expertise process is so important. Maybe we have not been good enough in our report, the draft report, to explain this simply, but we will do some efforts. Because of your questions, we will review once again to try to pass the key message.
Thank you very much. We are really behind us. I'd like to close this Q&A session. Yes, it has been pointed out that we should mention PICOs in our recommendation draft, and we should also think about the stakeholders and classification of stakeholders as well. And we also talked about high-level dose as well, and that we have to actually explain it more easily. And then people with experience, should actually also convey their experiences and knowledge to the community and to the society. And I would like to thank all of you for participating in the discussion. We have 1 hour for lunch, and we'd like to reconvene from 1:30. Now, I would like to ask you to please return the receivers that you have used in the morning at the reception as you leave the room, if you're leaving the room. Thank you very much for your participation.